Hello, this is Opera Insight 2025, and I'm your presenter, Dr. Don Feinberg. This episode, episode 4, focuses on Benjamin Britten's spine-tingling opera, The Turn of the Screw. And what tingles your spine is the eerie music. It is the only opera worthy of a horror movie soundtrack of the highest quality. But unlike a slasher movie, there are no jump scares. It's all done with subtle ambiguity, and when you really get into it, I promise you a night at the opera you will never forget. Now, the most important ambiguity in the story is that it's being told by characters whose perceptions are untrustworthy, whose subjective reactions and projections both draw us in and add to the uneasy feelings we have about what's going on. We, in the audience, experience a distorted reality right before our eyes. This is powerful stuff, not some TV episode with a big reveal at the end that explains everything. On the contrary, it's up to each and every one of us to decide what is real about this story as we witness it. On one level, it is, as brilliant director Louisa Mueller describes, a spooky ghost story, and on the other level, a psychological thriller. So, let's start with the first level. Ghosts. Do you believe in them? Surveys consistently show that about 40% of Americans, that's 4 in 10, believe in ghosts. What about angels? Similar surveys reveal about 8 out of 10 Americans believe in angels, and more than 9 out of 10 believe in a higher power in the universe. In this opera, there are supernatural elements for sure, and if you tend to believe in the supernatural, you'll be inclined to see the story through the concrete lens of these forces and hauntings beyond the control of the characters. Yet, it is also an opera of psychological intensity. How much of what we experience is the result of the psychological imbalance of the characters and a descent into psychotic obsession? This mental state leads to projections, seeing things that aren't quite there, in front of you and in others. They create a world that reflects inner conscious and unconscious psychological states. Now, with that said, on what hooks does the opera hang its psychological tension? Well, don't worry. If this opera were a movie, it would be rated PG because there is no overt violence or sexuality or inappropriate language. You can bring children old enough to hear ghost stories around a campfire or a Brothers Grimm's fairy tale. Besides, the opera can inspire children who are interested in performing, unlike most operas where the children are often appearing as supernumeraries, that is to say, extras on stage to supplement a scene, like the street urchins in La Bohème. The children in this opera play main roles. The action often revolves around them. Nonetheless, adults can relate to so much more. There are longings and beliefs in this opera that we all use to make sense of our world and how we live in it. Through the distorted notions of a housekeeper and a governess, we see visions of the nature of children. Are they innocents corrupted by a corrupt world? Or do these children have unrevealed lives with their own secrets and desires? Although never addressed directly in the opera, the longings of the characters punctuate the entire story. Marshall McLuhan first described hot and cold media over a half a century ago. Hot media provides a steady stream of information, and we are engaged by what is presented directly and fully. Hot media is one that includes all the details. By analogy, no medium is hotter than a live opera. Its music, its actions, its scenes are truly spectacular. I mean, literally, opera is a spectacle. On the other hand, cold media engages us by inviting us to fill in the gaps, to actively engage in creating our own perceptions. Operatic music almost always does this as well. Verdi's music, as he tells the story of Rigoletto, fills in the feelings that we experience the characters as having. We actively fill in what the words alone do not say. This also happens in The Turn of the Screw. Cold narratives increase the intensity of the story by activating our curiosity and powerful feelings like empathy or uneasiness. Here in this opera, while all the elements of hot media are present in the eerie music, the turn of the screw punctuates the narrative with unanswered questions. It draws us in. For example, every time the children in the opera sing songs and play their games, even recite their lessons, it can be seen as perfectly innocent or experienced as increasingly sinister. We each have to decide. We create our own experience by what we're seeing in the opera. It is all part of the ambiguity that lends itself to the unsettling and powerful impact of the opera. So, let's take a look at Act 1 and see how the piece plays out in this unnerving narrative. The opera begins as we witness the uncle guardian of the two children as he hires the new governess for them. Oddly, instead of episodic reports that you might expect, this uncle wants the governess never to contact him. And unlike most productions which deliver this prologue as a kind of introduction to a story by a narrator, never to be seen again, in Mueller's production, the scene portrays the actual interaction between the uncle and the governess. The seeds are planted. This introduces a relationship that has no reality for the remainder of the opera, except, and the most relevantly, in the mind of the governess. The character has no name. She's just called the governess. And this adds a sense of tense ambiguity and potential universality of her thoughts and feelings. She's ambivalent about taking the position at Bly, a faraway country house. Like a teenager with a crush, perhaps, she's drawn to the uncle. Taking the position both activates and isolates her. And in general, isolation undermines the foundation of sanity when we are stressed. And with Britten's music, we begin to feel the stress that the governess herself is experiencing. She arrives at Bly. The housekeeper, Mrs. Gross, and the children, Miles and Flora, offer her a warm welcome. It reassures her. She loves the uncle's house. She declares, "Bly is now my home." Then a disturbing letter arrives. Miles has been permanently expelled from school because he, quote, injured his friends. Mrs. Gross and the governess immediately dismiss the idea that Miles could be bad. They note how sweetly he plays and how gentle a look he turns to his sister. This is true. Throughout the opera, nothing in word or deed suggests he would physically injure his classmates. Nothing to suggest that he's up to no good or a mischief maker. So, what do you suppose would get a sweet boy kicked out of an all-boys school? It's never clarified in the opera, but these are Victorian times. What violation would merit permanent expulsion rather than academic discipline? Again, the opera never tells us. But in any case, true to her charge, the governess determines not to inform the uncle. The idea is endorsed by Mrs. Gross. Now, in the next scene, the governess proclaims her happiness, and when she heard a faint footstep outside the door. Now, let me pause here for a moment. If you hear a faint footstep and you're living in a house with a housekeeper and a couple of kids, who would you think would be outside the door? Perhaps it is the fantasy of the governess. Her very next line is, only one thing I wish he could see me. Her very next line is, only one thing I wish, that I could see him and that he could see how well I do his bidding. At this point, her longing is palpable, but seemingly she's unconscious of its implications, as well as the extent to which she will compromise her sanity before she lets erotic inclinations into her consciousness. But the unconscious has a way of letting itself be known. For the very next instant, she perceives a shadowy figure, and then she exclaims, "Ha, 'tis he!" And just as immediately, she undoes her desire. She fantasizes that this is a menace, a servant, a curious stranger, a fearful madman, an adventurer, an intruder. She perhaps projects her own longing to see the uncle, to connect with him, and that very longing frightens her. And then she translates this fear into a harmful imagining. Is it a ghost or is it her projection? Louisa Mueller, the director, has cleverly walked this blurred line so that we in the audience can experience its uncertainty, and we get to decide for ourselves. Now, the children interrupt with their game of tag to their story of Tom, the piper's son, stole a pig and away he run. Innocent enough, but the nursery rhyme concludes, pig was eat, then Tom was beat. Tom ran howling down the street. Miles wants Flora to chase him, and she gladly accommodates his wish. The game is played all to the innocent nursery rhyme of theft, gluttony, and violence. Now, the governess then sees the apparition again. We see what she sees, but are we let into her own world of her projection? Mrs. Gross comes in and offers that the ghost the governess encountered was Peter Quint, the now dead valet of the house. Mrs. Gross did not like him because he was, as she says, free with everyone, even the little Master Miles. He spent hours with him. In addition, Quint was free with the previous governess of the innocent children, Miss Jessel. He forced his will on her morning and night, Mrs. Gross asserts. Is this factual reporting or the jealous fantasies of the housekeeper? Mrs. Gross goes on. Miss Jessel slipped on the ice and died. In referring to Quint, she says, his were dreadful ways. Things then begin to really get mentally a little loosey-goosey, fraught with repressed feelings and marginally rational thought. The governess then distances herself and she sings, I know nothing of these things. In this sheltered place, the wicked world, where things unspoken of can be. Well, what things? The governess has a powerful inhibition and unconscious longing, and she wants to remove herself. She continues that the man must have been impudent, spoiled, and depraved. Mrs. Gross, I am afraid, not for me, but for Miles. He came to look for Miles, I'm sure of that, and he will come again. Stick with me here. The governess was shocked that Quint, who had his way with the former governess, is totally certain that it's Miles who's his target and not her, who is actually a governess. In the next scene, Miles enters reciting masculine Latin nouns. Now, for those of you who are Latin scholars out there, pay attention to the innocent sounding words that mean things like, celery stalk, Well, in slang, apparently these Latin words carry innuendo. Now, I won't go into any of that because when it comes to Latin, I'm already in over my head. Now, in Miles's aria, malo, the 4 different translations of the word are given. It could be the verb to prefer, the noun apple, but it could also mean naughty boy or in adversity. It is the same Latin word, but with the meaning changing depending on how you look at it. I believe this idea is central to the ambiguity of the opera. The meaning changes depending on how you look at it. The next scene is at the lake. The governess and Flora are there. The child is reciting the names of seas. She asks if the lake is a sea, and does it have a name? When learning that it has none, she names it the Dead Sea. Perhaps death and the lake are somehow tied together? We'll see later if this is foreshadowing. By way of support for this idea, the ghost of Miss Jessel appears. Flora ignores her. Also, perhaps simply can't see her. The governess is sure Flora did see the ghost and said nothing. Think about it for a second. This is very strange. First of all, if she could see it, why wouldn't Flora say anything? Because she knew Miss Jessel, and her silence would be especially puzzling. But now the governess is sure the ghosts will have their way and the children are lost. While she's asleep, Miles has an encounter with Quint. Now, is this the nightmare of the governess, or is this part of the ghost story? By now, you will have decided. My advice? Just go with it. Don't think about it at the opera. Experience it in your own way. You will make this opera your very own, because the opera will be evocative of your own experience. So as I said, just go with it. There'll be time enough later to hash it out with your friends and other opera goers. By the time the intermission starts, the sun will have set and the dusk will have given way to the dark, starry skies of Santa Fe. I sincerely believe that there is no better venue in the world to experience this opera than here in Santa Fe. The world itself turns down its light as the story holds us in its grasp. In Act 2, the story gets more intense. Is the governess going mad? Are the ghosts real or only in her mind? Will her repressed longing break through? Are the children really in danger? I won't give away any of the twists and turns of the ending. If you know the Henry James novella, then you know what happens. But I guarantee you, even if you've read it and you've never seen this opera, you will have experienced the story in a more powerful way than you had ever imagined. In general, the phrase, the turn of the screw, describes a circumstance that step by step is made more difficult in each successive step. In this opera, every encounter with the ghosts in the world or in her mind unravels the governess's sanity and threatens the children. Britten's eerie and evocative music reinforces this understanding by returning to its 12-tone theme in many variations, and the variations are increasing in intensity. This tightens the screw and applies pressure on the characters. And this, in turn, creates for us an awesome and chilling evening of opera, because ultimately, the screw turns on us. We see how fragile our human perceptions can be. We wonder about the innocence of children, and we get a glimpse of the known and unknowable world. As Hamlet said to his friend Horatio, there's more things in heaven and earth, Horatio, than are dreamt of in your philosophy. Next time, we leave the intimate world of the vulnerable human psyche and enter the realm of the gods in Wagner's Die Walküre. See you then.